All right, let's get started with today's topic, forage production. I just wanted to give you a couple of things that we're going to try to achieve today. The objective here is to create an understanding of the type of coverage provided under this forage production program and the commodity insured under the policy. This webinar will look at the required information to report your acreage to be insured, the insurable types of forage, the important dates that you'll need to follow to make sure that your reporting is timely submitted to your agent, and what the coverage is. We'll cover a little bit on the causes of loss and what your notice requirements are when a loss occurs. And forage production is available in all Pennsylvania counties except for Pennsylvania County. There is a crop insurance basic webinar. I'd like to remind you that there at our website at cropinsuranceinaamerica.org, there's a basics presentation that covers all of the insurance basics of the common crop insurance policies. This is the base policy of the crop provisions that we'll be going through later today. A few of the acronyms. Every industry has its set of acronyms, and crop insurance is no different. The first one there on the list is the actual production history. The forage production plan utilizes your actual production history, so you'll see that acronym APH throughout this presentation and many of the other presentations that are on the Crop Insurance Today, Crop Insurance in America website. Acreage reporting date is very vital. That's the date that you report all your acres, insurable and uninsurable, to your approved insurance provider. That's the AIP. And then we'll go on down the list there. A couple of the others that we'll be using today is the NAS, National Ag Statistics Service. Got a slide on there to kind of cover what the potential is or the opportunities for forage production is in the state of Pennsylvania. Notice of loss, NOL, is a term that's frequently used by your agent and your adjusters when you're dealing with those folks. No practice specified. That's MPS means that when you're looking on the actuarial tables at the type of coverages that are offered, no practice specified usually means that the coverage doesn't distinguish between irrigated and non-irrigated practices. So with that, let's continue on. A person type, you got to identify the person type on any application for crop insurance. But the person type is the entity you operate as for your sales and marketing. For example, if you sell as an individual and are married, you insure as an individual spousal person type. If you do business as a partnership with an employer identification number, you should insure under the partnership name and report the employer identification number that accompanies that partnership. As long as you stay within the guidelines of the crop insurance program, it is helpful that you insure as the same entity with the same tax ID as you would use for other government programs, particularly at the Farm Service Agency. So you want to make sure that how you're reporting your shares for crop insurance match what you're doing at the Farm Service Agency. On this slide, you'll see that the most commonly used person types are several other types that are available. We've got partnerships, corporations, individual as spousal, and the individual. Substantial beneficial interest. You want to make sure that by the sales closing date, you report all persons with an interest in you as the insured person of at least 10% and include those identification numbers. Spouses are presumed to have an SBI, substantial beneficial interest of 50%. So if your person type would normally include an SBI, spousal partnership, trust, corporation, etc., and you do not report the SBIs with a valid identification number, your application cannot be accepted. So let's look at an example here. We have a situation where there are two partnerships. Each has a 50% interest in the insured, which may be you. Each partnership consists of two individuals. So now we've got a total of 4 SBIs here, each with a 50% share of the applicable partnership. So we've got 4, and each now has a 25% interest in the applicant insured. So you'll need to report 4 SBIs, provide their social security numbers, employer identification numbers, or what have you. So this is the one exception to the rule that the spouses of the individual would not be considered to have a 50% interest, because we have 4 individuals making up 100% of the interest in you. So unless the spouse, of course, it is one of those 25% shares. Another important detail not to overlook is the conservation compliance requirement of crop insurance, and that's the submission of the AD 1026 form to the Farm Service Agency. This must be filed on or before the premium billing date for the crop insurance policy. You must comply with the high erodible land conservation and water conservation, or WC, provisions of the Food Security Act, and covers all land in all states and counties in which the person has an interest. You want to make sure to check your status, and your AIP's agent can help you with that. And because this is first and foremost an FSA program, it is ultimately your responsibility to find out your status. The basic units are available for most of the crop programs, or all the crop programs, and simply a basic unit is all insurable acreage of the insured crop in the county on the date coverage begins, in which the insured has 100% share in the crop, land owned by one person and operated by another person on a share basis. So those are the 2 distinguishing characteristics that you need to look at. So for a basic unit, unless otherwise specified in the crop provisions or special provisions, we have all insurable acreage of the insured crop in the county on the date coverage begins for the crop year in which the insured has 100% share in the crop. So typically when you look at a crop insurance policy, the clause, all insurable acreage of the insured crop in the county, this is not a pick and choose situation. You report all of your acres in the county that are insurable and uninsurable. So the 100% share in the crop, this includes share as an owner or operator, and/or land that is rented for cash, a fixed commodity payment, or any consideration other than a share in the crop. So you have a 100% share where your interest is 100% in the crop. So situations that result in less than 100% share in the crop, let's say land is owned by one person, maybe a landlord, and operated by another person on a share basis. A crop share with each different landlord, tenant, or sharecropper, so you have 66 with one, 50 with another, those are considered all shares, and they are all rolled up into a basic unit. So what I'm trying to say is varying percentages of shares within a basic unit do not qualify for separate basic units. Now, an optional unit, these are allowed by section or sectional equivalent under the Common Crop Insurance Policy, or by farm's FSA farm number. Depending on the crop and special provisions, you might be able to subdivide those optional units by irrigated practice. So in Pennsylvania, subdividing basic units into optional units by irrigated and non-irrigated are not available. Although the optional unit structure will require a higher premium, it does allow for losses to be paid on a more granular level than the basic units. There's a smaller land area involved in determining damage and production. So since we don't have optional units by practice, we do have optional units by section or sectional equivalents, or FSA farm numbers. So you can divide those sections of land down to smaller units. So qualifying for the optional unit, what's required? You must file acceptable production reports for at least the most recent APH crop year in the base period. And the key here, and one of the things, is the more records you provide, for the more years of records you provide, the better you are to tie your actual production history to the actual experience. So you want to plant the crop so that there are clear and discernible breaks in the planting pattern at the boundaries of each optional unit. So if you have a couple of fields that are in sections that cross section lines, there needs to be a discernible break in the planting pattern to make sure that we can separate those. Want to provide acceptable production evidence for the most recent APH crop year of the planted acreage and production for that unit. You don't want to commingle reporting those. You want to make sure that you're keeping those records separate. And that's a very key to any crop insurance program you might participate in. Wanted to look at the forage production 10-year insurance history in Pennsylvania. This is just going back to 2009, kind of see that the number of acres that are insured, the amount of indemnities and those kind of things. And just looking at totaling all of these up, I looked at this by coverage levels, and that there's about 350 of the 380 policies. My math isn't exact on that, but that's pretty close. But about 350 of those policies are at the catastrophic risk protection level, and the rest of them, I think the policies that were paid were on a 65 and 75% coverage level. And we'll get into that a little later. Just took this chart from NAS data for the state of Pennsylvania. Just kind of wanted to get an idea of the number of acres out there, the potential opportunity for forage production policies to insure. Primarily the alfalfa and the hay alfalfa acres are what we're looking at. The insurance cycle is key to understanding the process of the insurance year and the different requirements and the different stages that a crop insurance policy goes through. So we're simply walking us through this cycle. We're going to start in the upper right quadrant. An application for insurance is submitted to your insurance agent, and we'll talk about the dates later when you do that. Forage production is somewhat different from other crops in that it requires the insured to submit a forage underwriting report. That's something that the insured essentially certifies or self-certifies to the AIP or to your agent that you have an acceptable stand out there. You've done some plant counts and things like that. We'll go through that again later. The report can be completed by you, and if you find it necessary or the AIP finds it necessary to perform an inspection, they must also complete that inspection prior to insurance period beginning. If all the information needed is provided and after review by the AIP is acceptable, then the insurance attaches on the date specified in the crop provisions. Late and prevented planting provisions are not applicable for forage production for obvious reasons. It's not an annual crop. It's it's a perennial. It's established, and it's not something that we have to worry about year to year about late planting. That's covered under maybe a forage seeding policy that we did in an earlier webinar. In the event the planted crop is damaged, you must provide a notice of loss within 72 hours of your initial discovery. So you discover that maybe a hailstorm has occurred or it's getting very dry and it looks like you're going to have a lack of production. You need to send a notice of loss to your agent. So the AIP will perform an inspection, and if qualified, you'll receive an indemnity. The last step in the process is if there are any changes that are made to the policy by RMA, they are done so by the contract change date. And I believe for forage production, that is June 30th. So let's look at the policy information, some of the required reports. Some useful definitions that are important to understand. Adequate stand, we'll talk about that quite a bit throughout this presentation. It is a population of live forage plants that equals or exceeds the minimum required number of plants per square foot as shown in the special provisions. Air dry forage, what does that mean? It means that when we're going to measure production, we're going to measure forage that is dried in windrows by natural means to less than 13% moisture before being put into stacks or bales. Fall planted, that's a forage crop that is seeded after June 30th. Harvest is removal of forage from the windrow or field. Grazing will not be considered harvested. And spring planted, a forage crop that is seeded before July 1st. Now, fall planted and spring planted are important to understand for that first year of coverage after seeding. Direct marketing is just what it is. It's sale of a forage crop directly to consumer without the intervention of an intermediary, such as a wholesaler, shipper, buyer, or broker. And an example is direct marketing and selling directly to another person. The year of establishment. Now this gets back into, remember our spring planted and our fall planted definitions. The year of establishment is the period between seeding and when the forage crop has developed an adequate stand. Insurance during the year of establishment may be available under the forage seeding policy. Insurance under this policy does not attach until after the year of establishment. So what that is saying, let's say for this year, we're in 2019, we planted a forage in May. This was 2019 is our year of establishment. The year after establishment will be 2020. The year of establishment is determined by the date of seeding, which I just said was May. The year of establishment for spring planted forage is designated by the calendar year in which seeding occurred. Again, that'd be May 2019. And the year of establishment for fall planted forage is designated by the calendar year after the year in which the crop was planted. So it's August, and if we're planting any seeding any alfalfa right now, which it's after July 1, for it meets the definition of fall planted, our year of establishment doesn't actually occur until 2020. Actual production history, this is just an overview. We made a reference earlier in the presentation on slide 3 to a crop insurance basic presentation. It'll walk through a lot more detail than what this slide does. I would encourage you to review that presentation if you have already not done so. And basically the takeaway here is that want to make sure that you're providing all of the records for the crop for the number of years that you've been growing it. So if you've been growing it for 3 years, you want to make sure that you provide all 3 years of records. So the application must be completed and signed by the earliest sales closing date. If it's late, obviously it's going to be rejected, but you want to make sure that you include your name, address, tax ID, substantial beneficial interest, along with your selected plan of insurance. In this case, it'd be the actual production history. Identify the county, the crop, forage production, coverage level, whether that's CAT level, 50%, 55%, 60 on up to 75% is available for forage production. You want to make a price election. The current price, I believe, is $189. You can select a price election, which means you can select 100% of $189 or something less. Any optional endorsements you may want on the crop, which there are none for forage production. You want to plan to spend some time with your agent completing the form, because one missed box can have a big impact on your coverage. If you produce the crop in 2 counties, you can choose to insure in one county but not the other. It's kind of one of the tenets of crop insurance that all of the crop in the county is insurable. So the policies are on a county basis. So keep that in mind. And the other thing is, if you have maybe a 75% coverage level in one county, you can have 65% coverage in another county, but you can't mix and match within a county the different coverage levels. So when the AIP receives your properly completed and timely submitted application, it'll process your application for coverage. You can't cancel the policy with the initial crop year. So one of the things we talked earlier about were some of the important dates, and the sales closing date is September 30th. That's the date that you need to complete and sign your application. Wanted to make sure that for spring seeded acreage, going back to my example of the forage that you seeded in May, you'll want to do that coming up here this September 30th so that your coverage is in force. Insurance attaches on that May planting on May 22nd of 2020. So it's kind of a tricky thing, and the dates with forage production are one of those things that sometimes can get a little tricky when you sign your application, when you got to do your underwriting report, and those kind of things. So we'll get into the underwriting report. But for the fall planted stuff, our August example, you'll need to have your underwriting report and insurance attaches October 16th of 2020. So the forage production underreporting report, it must be completed and a copy submitted to your agent before insurance attaches. Let's go back a slide. Insurance attaches for that May planted crop on May 22nd of 2020. So that's when you need to have your forage underwriting report to the agent. For that fall planted acreage, the August stuff, you'll need to have it by October 16th of 2020. Kind of tricky. So there in my second bullet, I kind of backtracked a little bit, but for every year on that May planting, it'll be October 16th for all subsequent years, because a couple of years in with a forage production crop, it doesn't matter when it was planted. This is what the forage underwriting report looks like. I've detailed kind of a couple of important sections there, section 14 and 15. That's the information that is key to determining insurability. That's where you'll go out and identify the number of forage plants per square foot, whether it's alfalfa, clover, or other parts of the country might allow for pure stands of clover and different things, and you go out and count the number of plants within a square foot measuring device, and we'll talk about those later. So number 15 is the percent of ground cover, and that's basically, there isn't any scientific method to that. It's a visual inspection. If you're looking at your measuring device of maybe 2 square feet, 3 square feet, and alfalfa appears to cover more than 60% of the ground cover, then it's over 60%. If it's less than 60%, then you'll know that it's alfalfa grass mixture. Acreage reporting, want to do that by location and unit. File an acreage report of all insured acreage by the acreage reporting date, and for forage production, that is November 15th. Production reporting. That's the total production harvested from insurable acreage for all cuttings. Most areas for alfalfa generally have more than 1 cutting, maybe 2, maybe 3, depending on where you're at. And that must be submitted, the production report, by November 14th. So when the forage is harvested other than air dry hay production, so maybe haylage or something like that, the production account must be adjusted to the equivalent of air dry hay. The Loss Adjustment Standards Handbook that is used by the companies contains some charts that will convert moisture into an air dry equivalent. Fed records are only acceptable for the current year's production. And the handbook here says, for example, you cannot provide Fed records from 2013 in the crop year for 2020 for establishing an APH database unless those records can be verified, and it gives some third-party examples there with billing receipts verifying the amount of production. So verifiable production, we just introduced the new term there. That evidence is required. Here's a list of some of the things that from a disinterested third party that can be acceptable. You can read the list there, but it includes warehouse receipts, storage facility records, packer records, first handler records, load summaries, and settlement sheets, etc. So production reporting. This is just out of one of the handbooks, the crop insurance handbook that your agent uses direction to help them create a checklist and those type of things to make sure that you as the producer make sure that all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted. But the following information must be included on those records in the previous slide. You want to identify the crop, the quantity of production that can be converted to the proper unit of measure if necessary, your name, the date of the transaction, name of the third party facility, the unit number where it came from, or the block number if and this is information that covers all crops. So, and the location of the production. Remember earlier in the slide we talked about optional units and things like that. I want to make sure that you keep that production record separate by unit, whether it's a basic unit or optional unit. I want to make sure that the production is specific to that unit. That is very key to any crop insurance policy you might have. Identify the practice and type of crop, the crop year the commodity was produced, and the last one really isn't applicable to forage production, but you know, those items 6 through 9 sometimes may not be provided on the record, so you want to make sure that you do put those on it. So for example, you might have a warehouse ticket. It's not going to specify whether it was irrigated or alfalfa grass or grass alfalfa mixture. You'll want to include that information on those records. So for farm stored production, in addition to what we had on the 2 previous slides, you want to maintain and report records on a unit type basis. Make sure you include the date of cuttings and the harvestings, the number of bales harvested, and these must have contemporaneous weights from bales from each cutting or harvest. You want to base those bale weights on the average of at least 2 bales per cutting type unit weighed, dated and signed by a disinterested third party. And the last bullet there basically identifies, you know, the disinterested third party. There's requirements that you must provide notice to the insured, you know, prior to harvest, or to the AIP, excuse me, prior to harvest, so that they might come out and do an inspection and those type of things. And you can ask that your AIP or perhaps FSA come out and measure the bales for you. So what is the insured crop that we're talking about? Under the crop provisions, it provides kind of a broad spectrum here. It can be a planted perennial alfalfa, perennial red clover, perennial grasses, or a mixture thereof, or other species as shown in the actuarial documents, might be brome grass or something else. But for Pennsylvania specifically, the special provisions override the crop provisions, and it states that we have 2 types insurable: alfalfa, which can be a pure stand of alfalfa, or a stand of alfalfa and grass in which 60% or more of the ground cover is alfalfa, or the alfalfa grass mixture, and that's the mixed stand of alfalfa and grass in which alfalfa comprises more than 25% but less than 60% of the ground cover. Recall that on the underwriting report in section 15 that we spoke about ground cover and that visual inspection. This is where it comes into play. You're going to go out and do a visual inspection in different representative areas of the field that are going to be identified to you by your agent, and you're going to do plant counts and kind of do a visual inspection of that area to see whether more than 60% of the ground cover is alfalfa or less. So continuing on with the insured crop, it's grown during 1 or more years after the year of establishment. We covered the year of establishment earlier in the presentation. Has an adequate stand at the beginning of the insurance period. What is an adequate stand? Well, an adequate stand for that alfalfa, pure alfalfa or an alfalfa mixture that's more than 60% of the ground cover, the first year after the year of establishment, you go out and you measure so many square feet, divide it out, and whatever you come up with, if you come up with at least 9 plants per square foot of alfalfa in that first year, it's insurable as alfalfa. The second year, 6 plants per square foot, and the third and later years is 4.5 plants per square foot. So the alfalfa grass mixture, that's the one where alfalfa makes up less than 60% of the ground cover. The first year is 6 plants of alfalfa per square foot. Second year is 4, and then third and later years is 3. So continuing on qualifying what an insured crop is not, it is a crop that is not grown with a forage crop. So if you're growing your forage production amongst the trees of an apple crop or something like that, that doesn't count. Does not exceed the age limitations for forage stand count contained in the special provisions. The Pennsylvania special provisions do not have an age statement, so that's something we don't worry about there for Pennsylvania. And it's not grown solely for wildlife protection or management. So it's not a field that you're out just growing it to feed whatever livestock, or not livestock, but wildlife, keep the deers on in your backyard, that kind of thing. The insurance period begins for the spring seeded. That's the stuff we seeded back in my example in May. It's the May 22nd following the year of seeding. So you seeded a crop in May 2019, May 22nd of 2020 is when the insurance period would begin for that forage. For the August example that I had earlier, it'll be October 16th for all subsequent years. So we're looking at that for October 2020. The insurance period ends the earliest of, obviously, total destruction of the crop, removal from the windrow or the field for each cutting, the final adjustment of a loss. So your insurance company has come out, sent an adjuster, and they've done an adjustment. All the paperwork's been signed, so that would end the insurance period for that cutting or for all cuttings, depending on when it occurred. Date grazing commences, and the reason for that is harvest does not include grazing. Abandonment, or October 15th of the crop year. Forage production availability, touched on this earlier. It's available in all counties of Pennsylvania except Pennsylvania County. It's the one denoted in the white there on the lower right corner. You can access the actuarial information browser for your county. Got the website there. Let's take a look at what you'll find after going to that link. This is what it looks like. You identify the commodity, which is forage production. The commodity year will be ensuring the 2020 crop year coming up. The APH is the plan. State, obviously, Pennsylvania, and then select the county in which your farm is located. Coverage levels and premium subsidies. These are the available coverage levels for forage production. Catastrophic risk production on up to 75%. The subsidy levels there you can see is that for basic and optional units, it's the same all the way across, from 67% on down to 55% for the 75% coverage level. Cat protection coverage is fixed at 50% of your average yield and 55% of the price election. So let's say we have a 4-ton APH. Cat coverage would provide a 2-ton guarantee. $189 is our price, our established price, and I believe 55% of that is somewhere in the neighborhood of $104 or $105. So you'd have a 2-ton guarantee times $104, and that would give you your per acre guarantee to put a baseline on. And we'll cover that a little later, provide an example. Causes of loss, the standard causes of loss out of the basic provisions are listed there. Specific to forage production, damage or loss of production that occurs after the removal from the windrow is not covered. So you've gone out, you've harvested or you've cut it, laid it in a windrow, and then until that stuff is baled or after it's baled, it's no longer covered. Your duties in the event of loss, protect the crop from further damage by providing sufficient care. Provide notice within 72 hours of your initial discovery of damage, whether that be a hailstorm or maybe drought. Looks like it's gonna come up with loss of production that won't meet your guarantee. Let your agent know. Notices may be made by telephone or in person to your agent, but you must confirm that in writing within 15 days of that notice. If you are required to leave representative samples, the samples must be left intact until after the company has performed an inspection or until 15 days after completion of harvest on the unit, whichever is earlier. And samples in the field, this is right out of the basic provisions, must be 10 feet wide and extend the entire length, and it specifies longest dimension of the field. Continuing on, your duties in the event of a loss. Let's say a loss has happened. You want to notify the company within 3 days of the date harvest should have started if the crop will not be harvested. You want to make sure that at least 15 days prior to any production being sold by direct marketing, you let your company know so that they may come out, do an inspection just to verify that the amount of production is there or not, at least 15 days prior to beginning of harvest if a prior notice of damage has been made. So on the earlier slide, we said you make a notice within 72 hours of a hailstorm. It may be a month before the actual cutting occurs, and that's what the prior notice may have been, just to explain that. And then 5 days before grazing the insured acreage. You must not destroy the damaged crop until after the company has provided written consent to do so. There may be situations where the representative strips may come into play so that you may destroy the rest of the production and leave a strip there so they can come out and do what they need to do. But if you fail to meet the notice requirements and such failure results in the AIP's inability to inspect or appraise the insured crop, all such production will be considered undamaged. Determining the stand counts. This gets back to that underwriting report and the information that we're going to put into sections 14 and 15. So we want to identify the number and locations of our sample areas. We're going to toss a measuring device there faintly in the background. You can see a hula hoop being thrown up into the air. It may or may not be a hula hoop. You can cut down a hula hoop to the specified measurements, and those measurements are provided in the Loss Adjustment Standards Handbook to measure the inches out so that you can get either a two foot square representative area or maybe a 3 foot or more. And then you're just going to throw that out there in a representative area and count the number of live plants within it. So one of the things here is if our field or subfield consists of anywhere from 1/10 of an acre on up to 10 acres, we're going to need to have 3 samples. So you'd have 3 entries there on your forage underwriting report for that unit. If we got 10 acres or more, up to 40, then we're going to need 4 samples. So we talked a little bit about the size of the sample. It can be either 1 square foot, 2 square foot, 3 square foot, et cetera, depending on your measuring device. Again, count the number of insurable live forage plants. That would be alfalfa in Pennsylvania. Want to make sure that you've done that. And then you enter those plant counts for each type that applies. So you got your two types down there on the bottom of the slide. So if we've got alfalfa and we're in that first year after the year of establishment, we want to be able to count 9 plants for it to be insurable. If it's an alfalfa grass mixture, then we'll need 6 plants of alfalfa to be insurable. A claim example. Here's where we get into coverage levels and how they work and price elections and that type of thing. So let's assume we have one basic unit of 50 acres of alfalfa type forage. We've insured it that the maximum coverage level available, 75%. We selected the 100% price election, that's $180 per ton. And our guarantee per acre is $3 per, or 3 tons per acre. Now note in the white box at the bottom of the page, we had a 4 ton per acre APH, multiply that by the 75% coverage level, and that gets our 3 ton guarantee. But due to adverse weather, we only harvested 50 tons from that unit. So what's our production guarantee for the unit? We take our 50 acres times our 3 tons per acre guarantee, gives us 150 tons production guarantee for the unit. Our 100% price election of $189 times 150 tons gives us our unit guarantee in dollars of $28,350. We only had 50 tons that we harvested. 50 tons times $189 equals $9,450. We subtract that from our per unit guarantee, and the difference is an $18,900 indemnity. Flows right through. At this time, I'll entertain any questions if there are any. The key thing is to pay attention to the dates. Make sure that your acreage, you meet the acreage reporting date. The underwriting report is very key in production, forage production. I don't believe there's another crop insurance production or crop insurance program that has that type of a requirement. So you want to make sure that you do that. And then also make sure that by September 30th, you get into the office and sign up.
This is the question.
So we have a question about area yield protection. Is production required in previous years? It was not required and does not affect coverage levels. Yes, the area yield protection or area protection program does not require reporting production, and forage production is one of the few programs that doesn't require that for this. This presentation was specifically to the actual production history program, and I did not include any slides on the area yield protection.
That's it.
Okay. So that's all the questions we have for today. Let's move on to our finishing slides. I just want a couple of reminders here. The RMA website, this is where you go. The address, rma.usda.gov. That's the opening page. And then to find an agent, put it up there in red where that is. Click on that to find an agent in your area. This is the page that it goes to. And then you want to make sure that you click where the red box is to go to the agent locator page. And that's all we have for today. Thank you for your participation, and hopefully you found this useful and helpful.